morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to chapter 15. We're talking about how one species turns into another species. Phylogeny studies how how different species are related to each other. And the way different species are related to each other are just like how you're related to your cousins and your second cousins, your grandparents, your fourth cousins. You follow your personal family tree back, as far as you can. We can do ancestry.com. We can go and follow our family tree back, and it gets, bigger and bigger as you go. Well, if you continue to follow that concept, you can do the same thing with species. This species came from that species. This was the parent species or the grandparent species of the current species. And that's what phylogeny. Phylogeny basically constructs the family tree of species, not the family tree of an individual. What do we use to determine phylogeny? What do we use to determine the ancestry of species? We can use the fossil record. We already talked about that. We can use morphological homologies. Remember we talked about the bones and the arms. We can talk about molecular homologies. We can look at the molecules within the bodies, as in, all right, so if you have 4 species and they all make hemoglobin, they all make the same protein, you look at how similar they are, and it stands to reason that the species that are most closely related, and they should make their proteins the same way. And if you have a species that makes them considerably different, then that's probably less closely related. People that within your family look similar, people outside your family are going to look considerably different. When we look at these morphological homologies, we do need to kind of look at it with a critical eye, because we can have this phenomenon known as convergent evolution. Convergent evolution says that just because these two organisms have the same feature, it doesn't necessarily mean they're related to each other. It can simply just mean that they have that feature because that feature is necessary in their environment. Think about the feature of dark skin. Is everyone with dark skin related to each other? Well, yeah. No, because you've got people in Africa that have dark skin. We have people in India that have equally dark skin. We have people in Australia, native Aboriginal Australians, that also have dark skin. Dark skin is necessary when you live close to the equator. It's necessary to be protection against the environment. They have a similar feature. Does it mean they're related to each other? No, it does not necessarily mean related to each other. They have that feature because it's necessary for where they live. Convergent evolution. Just because they have the same feature doesn't necessarily mean they're related to each other. And so when we're doing this phylogeny, when we're doing this work of trying to discover who's related to whom, we can't just look at everything on face value. We've got to have other pieces of evidence to put it all together. You have to make sure. You can't just hinge it on one piece of evidence. When we look at these two organisms, we say, hey, they're really similar. Look, they've got very similar features. These guys are a perfect example of convergent evolution. This down here is a mole, a placental mole, which means that she holds the babies inside of her and gives live birth. This is a marsupial mole. Why do they have flat heads? Why do they have tiny eyes? Why do they have big claws? Why do they have long bodies? Why do they have short tails? Because they do the same job. If you do the same job, you're going to need the same tools. You're going to need big claws for digging in the earth. You need a long body because you're going to live in a tunnel. You don't need good eyes because you'll live underground. Why do you need a short tail? Because a long bushy tail is going to be a problem when you're underground. Why do they have similar shaped bodies? Because they have the same job. Are they related to each other? No. Aside from being mammals, they're not related to each other at all. This thing right here is more closely related to you than it is to that. Why do they look the same then? Convergent evolution. We've got to look at these things with a critical eye. We can't just use one single piece of evidence and say, bam, you're related to each other. You have to look at a multitude of things. How do we classify living things? How do we decide who's related to whom? How do we name living things? The way we name living things is by what's called taxonomy. Taxonomy studies the naming of organisms, and it was invented by this guy named Carl von Linné. Carl von Linné was a Swedish botanist, and he's the father of modern taxonomy. He is the one that invented what we refer to as the binomial naming system. Bi means two, nom means name, binomial, two names. He loved this binomial naming system so much he changed his own name. He went from Carl von Linn to Carolus Linnaeus. You've probably heard of Linnaeus, right? Linnaeus invented the science of naming things. No, Carl von Linné did. The Swedish botanist. You loved your own invention so much you changed your frickin' name. At the time of Linnaeus, there were only two kingdoms. Every living thing fit into one of two kingdoms. It was either a plant or an animal. Kingdom plantae, kingdom animalia, animal and vegetable. When I was in college, we had 5 kingdoms. The 5 kingdoms were plants, animals, fungi, protists, and these things called Monera, bacteria, Monera. Remember we talked about this at the beginning of the semester. Monera was broken out, bacteria were broken out into domains of their own, and all of the 4 remaining kingdoms, plants, animals, fungi, and protists, were all lumped together in a domain of their own. So he had 2 kingdoms. We now have many more kingdoms because as science progresses, we find out that the way we did it before wasn't accurate. We changed to a more accurate method. The binomial naming system is a 2-part name. Genus species is the 2 parts. Remember, the way you group something is domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. A domain would be like a continent. A kingdom would be like a country. A phylum would be like a state. A class would be like a county. As you get further and further in, you get closer and closer to your individual organism. Genus and species is our smallest part of the genus and species is the smallest part of the classification. Genus would basically be like your street that you live on, and then your species would be your house. How do I get to your house starting from this thing called Earth? You get narrower and narrower. Well, I live on North American continent. I live in America. I live in Georgia. I live in Bleckley County. I live in Cochrane. I live on this street. I live in this numbered house. Narrower, narrower, narrower. The species name is both of those, that 2-part. Homo sapiens. Boa constrictor. Canis lupus. All right, that's called the species name. The last part is referred to as the specific epithet for each species. So what is the specific epithet for humans? Sapiens. What is humans' scientific name? Homo sapiens. Again, we start with the 3 kingdoms, the 3 domains. Within each domain, there are several kingdoms. Within a kingdom, there are several phyla. Within a phylum, there are several classes. Within a class, there are several orders. Within each order, there's several families. Within each family, there's several genuses. Within each genus, there are several species. And we follow it all the way down to get to one individual, and this is to a cat, the house cat, Felis catus. Phylogeny studies how things are related to each other. Classic taxonomy in Linnaeus's day relied on morphology, just relied on body shapes, because they didn't have DNA technology back then. They didn't have molecular technology back then. We didn't really even have this technology until like probably the 70s or 80s. Cladistic taxonomy relies on protein and gene similarities, and we talked about that looking at the hemoglobin. You look at the shapes first, and then you look at the DNA, and you compare the DNA sequences. The ones that are more similar are more closely related to each other. This shows our order Carnivora, where our cats were found, and this shows who's related to whom. The closer the branches are, the more closely related they are to each other. Weasels, otters, you can understand how weasels and otters are going to be closely related to each other, and that those two are more closely related to each other than they are to cats, and that coyotes and wolves are more closely related to each other than they are to weasels. All right, this shows cladistics. This is showing the family tree of these species. Each time we look at species, each new protein we look at, each new gene we look at, sometimes gives us a subtly different picture of relatedness, of who's related to whom. And only by studying many, many, many different Genes, by studying many, many different proteins, can we get a clear picture of relatedness, of phylogeny. And we get new data and we draw new trees and we move groups around as we try to figure out. And this is an ongoing science. We're still learning as we go through this process. One of the things that it took me a very long time to accept is that the closest relative for a bird, what's birds' closest relatives? I don't know, maybe mammals because they're both warm-blooded? Nope. Birds' closest relatives are crocodilians. The evidence is there. I didn't want to believe it, but it's true. We have to look at multiple things to try to figure out who is related to whom. Who's related to whom? Birds came from dinosaurs. Their most closest relative, all the dinosaurs are dead. Their closest relative are crocodilians. That's all for chapter 15. Thanks a lot. See you in biology 2. Maybe.